Hold on him, extort shit, bully the flow on him.
So today we're building spider armor. We're turning this into this. So I bought these chrome pens. You can buy them on Amazon. I highly recommend them as they work great. After some troubleshooting, we were off, and like I said, these pens are amazing and very easy to work with. I started with the web lines on the mask, as I figured if they were already reflective, I wouldn't have to do as precise of a job when I was covering the actual panels. This was the second most time consuming aspect, as there was a lot of going back over parts that I had done prior, as the paint would dry uneven or even parts I just completely missed. But these pens came in a pack of 3, all with different tip types, and that made a big difference because I had thinner tip to go to the more precise parts, as well as having the fatter tip just for the bigger parts. So there are a couple times where I went out of the lines and actually drew on the panels, but it really didn't end up mattering because they were going to be covered up anyways with a reflective material. These types of mistakes were honestly okay because they were going to get covered up anyways. If there was a crevice covered in paint, this probably took me about 2.5 hours to do. When you get tired of standing, break out the knee pads. Now the back of the helmet was a little tricky to do because it separates because it is a helmet, so some people have fatter heads, and maybe it would have been a little easier if I had one of those mannequin things for wigs, but I was using a broken tripod, and you gotta work with what you got, so this thing was just the best thing that I had, and maybe in the future I'd buy something like that, but honestly for this one-time project, it's not a necessity. After finishing the web lines, this thing already looks a million times better. Like, I was even considering just stopping here because it reminds me of one of the better variants from Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I love that suit because it just fits the whole Miles taking the mantle from Peter aesthetic, as it's a fresh take on the original classic. Regardless, it's better than this garbage. Seriously, I don't even know why they needed to update his suit again. They already did it in his own game, and even this game he has a new suit. The black variant of the tracksuit is an actual evolution of the suit. Maybe that's just me. What do you think? So after finishing the web lines, it brings us to the next part, which is getting these mirror pieces on the mask, the actual armor parts. I forgot to hit record, so I apologize for having 2 pieces already on there, but basically what I was doing was putting strips of these pieces one by one. Here I'm recording me putting a double strip that I did, but I only did that a couple of times. This is way in the beginning, and I found if I had each individual strip, it would allow me more maneuverability whenever I was placing any of the pieces, whereas if I did big chunks, it was a lot harder to push and move them around. All I was doing was counting the squares, and man, this thing was filling out pretty nicely. Again, touching it up after a couple of sections and seeing how much we got done. I was just creating non-traditional Tetris pieces, and man, when you do arts and crafts, get ready for a mess. So about the strips, basically what I would do is I would cut the long squares of the mirror pieces into smaller sections of about 10 to 15, and then once I had that half, I would cut those into individual strips and I would just apply. And again, I did not have to be as accurate because the web lines are already filled in, as well as I had the finer tip pen to go into the smaller, finer areas, so I didn't have to be as precise. And that honestly made this job so much easier, because if I had to actually cover each individual bit with a mirror bit, I'd probably have to order so many different types of mirror pieces, as well as just I would have to be actually as precise as possible. So it's a little cheat code, but again, I'm not a professional. There's a more professional way of doing this, then feel free to let me know. But man, this thing, when it's filling out, it just looks so good. Look at it. Oh yeah, and the eyes glow up. Pretty cool, right? So if it looks more graffitied on, it's because I really wanted to try out these pens. They just look so good. That's Julian. Yeah, so like I was saying, it'd be take one of these sheets, fold them in half, cut them in half, and then cut all these strips. I found if I just made a bunch, so I had a lot in bulk, it was just way faster to move instead of having to cut one and apply it. So each of these strips had a sticky adhesive, which on the reviews some of them said they didn't really stick that well, but I found they stuck a little too well because making mistakes was really annoying to have to get these things off of it. But I don't really have much to say for this bit, so I'll let you just enjoy and watch. So I definitely made way more than I needed because I ended up with a surplus. And the worst part about this is I actually cut myself on the last one, so just be careful if you decide to do this project. Also, Dallas lost. That's good. Honestly, I really have no room to talk because I'm a Giants fan and we suck even more than they do, so hopefully next year. So even though I had written all over this thing, I did end up taking those chrome pens and painting all over the edges of the paneling, as I was trying to give myself as much leniency as possible because these mirror pieces are all squares and a lot of these panels are very weirdly shaped, but man, when it fills in, it looks so good. Some cool stuff was happening when I was about a Phantom of the Opera's way through this project. I really love how this is coming out. As we were getting closer towards the end, the hardest part was probably the eyes. As you can even see right over there, it looked so crooked. I ended up having to redo that part, but it's only because of the curvature, and again, these are squares, so it's really hard to get them to bend. And doing the strips actually made this a lot easier. I couldn't imagine doing this with those 2 or 3 or even full strips because of how small the paneling got. The best strategy ended up being that as I was applying the strip, it would be to remove the adhesive from under it so I could follow up while pulling the sticky part out from under it. It just helped me line things up a lot easier, and honestly, keeping them as strips was what made this project super simple. Yeah, every time I had singular individual pieces, I would just end up sticking them to the pen because it looked cool. So yeah, mirror pen. This thing is filling out pretty nicely, if I do say so myself. By this point, I was pretty much at the final stretch. I had about 1/8 left and the nose, and honestly, the nose was where I was the most worried because it's the center of the web line, so there's a lot of unique pieces that you were going to need. And luckily, some of these things were broken when they came, which was honestly a good thing because I was able to fit those broken fragments into the much more weird spaces because these squares would not fit into this tiny nose all on their own. This is another instance where the pens came in clutch because I didn't have to be as precise with the pieces. I could just fill in with the metallic paint and it would cover up the back of whatever wasn't covered by a mirror piece. Thank you, pen. I love you so much. So the last thing I did I don't really think was necessary, but I just wanted to make sure that no one could really see any of the red that was peeking from under. I don't think that they really could have, but just to be safe, I did one quick little cover of paint on the edges, and with that I was finished with this thing, and take a look. This thing ended up turning out way better than I expected. Like, I am in love with this thing. It looks even cooler than spider armor. It took about 8 to 10 hours, but honestly it was worth every second. What do you guys think? Let me know. Thank you for watching.
This is the one that's supposed to be our leader? Give me a break. I should be in charge of this group. I'm the real Spider-Man.